Hi, everybody. Welcome. As you can see from behind me, the slides are not going to be particularly legible. I have them posted on speakerdeck.com/Boyarsky, and they're the most recent deck, so you can read them now or later. Conveniently, most of this is about listening to me talk and the interaction you have amongst yourselves and not the slides per se, but the information is good as a review. So, presenting in person. We're in person. Yay, real people. This is exciting. This is my third time presenting in person since the pandemic, and it's awesome. About me. I've been volunteering with FIRST for 13 years. I judge FLL and FTC, which is directly relevant since we're talking about awards. I'm a Toastmaster, which is a speaking group. I am a programmer. I've been doing that for 20 years. I am one of 300 Java champions in the world, and I am a published author. Yay. I'm going to be giving away 2 copies of this book during the presentation, once towards the beginning, so your odds are good, and once at the very end. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Good, you all have hands. This is excellent. Okay. I also have one quick advertisement before we start. For the New York City Regional, we are looking for volunteers. If you would like to volunteer, you volunteer on firstinspires.org. Additionally, it is almost certain that teams are going to be restricted in the number of people they can bring with them to the event. So if you have a large team, volunteering early increases your chances of being able to go without being counted against that total. I know we have a couple of large teams in attendance today, so that is a useful fact. All right, let's get started. First thing to be aware of when you're presenting in person is that the audience cannot make you louder. That means if the judges hear you mumbling to themselves, they may interrupt you and ask you to be louder, or they may just struggle to hear you and miss stuff, which is way worse. That means it's on you to be loud. And you notice I'm presenting without a microphone today. If Nikki can hear me all the way in the very back, that means that you're capable of speaking to the judges who are probably going to be 12 feet away from you and not in an auditorium. Projecting your voice is important, but that doesn't mean shouting at the top of your lungs for the entire time. That means being able to speak in a comfortable voice and then raise your voice for emphasis. Right? When you're trying to make an important point, you're louder for that, but the opposite of loud is not too quiet to hear you. There are going to be a number of exercises in this presentation because telling you to be louder or to be more dynamic isn't going to be memorable. Getting you to do it is. Conveniently, our first exercise results in someone winning a book. Yay! I'm going to ask you each to count off, so you're going to say a number. If I can't hear you, you haven't said the number loud enough. And then I'm going to draw a random number from the numbers that were chosen. We're doing this in order, 1, 2, 3, so, don't say 42. Let's get started in the front.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Okay. Everybody was a really good volume. Number 4 I could hear, but it was a little quieter than would be ideal. So I'm picking a random number between 1 and 13 on my phone. And the winner is number 9. Who's number 9? Would you like the book? Okay. And you're going to see me at the end, and I will sign it and give it to you. Okay. Great. Next up, we have our second topic, that you and your visuals are now separate. That's something that is both better and worse in person. When we're presenting on Zoom, there's one screen, 2 if they choose to pop things out. But your visuals, aka your PowerPoint, have the same level of emphasis as you do. When you're presenting in person, that's not usually the case. First of all, you have to think about what you want your visuals to be. You have an advantage in person that your visuals can be actual props. For example, in FTC, people will often hand you a prototype and show you that that's what they did. In FRC, you can 3D print something. You can show a flyer from this event or something that your team sponsored or organized. So you have the ability to make things more tangible for the audience because you're in person and you can give them things whether to touch or even to keep. If you want to do something like slides don't work in person, at judging, you can do posters, you can do a flipboard, you can do anything you want in order to have a visual impact. It's definitely more impactful when you're doing a presentation, like a chairman's presentation, to have some sort of visual for people to relate to. It helps them remember things. And ultimately, when you're judging, that's the most important thing, that the judge retains the information you tried to give them. You don't want them to be like, oh, yeah, I saw the team with the black sweatshirts, and they said something good. Like, great. You want them to remember what it was. Like, oh, I remember that team. They had that cool logo on their sweatshirts, and they told us that they did this type of outreach. So having something to reinforce it is helpful. Also, presenting without PowerPoint is harder, because now you're responsible for making your points clear and your organization clear. So when you're writing your presentation, you can't just copy last year's. You have to think about how it's going to work in the real world and testing it in the real world. There's different types of presenting in person. When you speak at a conference, or a school like today, you're lucky in that you have AV equipment in back of you and you have a screen, which let me do a PowerPoint presentation. When you do chairman's judging, you have whatever you brought with you. You could bring a tablet and sit there and click through it. That's probably going to be awkward and break the flow, but you're allowed to. You're not going to be provided with a nice projector and computer and given time to set up. Similarly, when you have pit interviews, the things you have available to you are the things that are right around you. Right? You have the robot in all likelihood, you have whatever's in your pit, you have tools. You certainly don't have a computer with a presentation preloaded on a screen behind you. Okay? And I have seen the tablet thing. It's awkward, and it's probably going to be more awkward since everyone's wearing masks and people don't want to be close together, because to make a tablet work, you have to be fairly close to people. So now we have our second exercise. This one we're going to do in a large group, and then the other exercises we're going to do in smaller groups. For this exercise, I want to brainstorm what might be useful to bring with you to an interview, whether it's an FTC interview about your robot or a chairman's interview about your whole team. If you can think of anything, raise your hand. Okay, I need glasses. I can't see hands. Yes? Photos are great. Photos are visual. They provide evidence that something happened, and they're really memorable. Making it into a little pamphlet is probably stronger than loose photos, just because loose photos are a logistic of now you have to deal with this, right? And you're doing a lot of things during your chairman's interviews. So by having them in a book together, they're going to be ordered, and you can page through it, but it's not, oh, shoot, I dropped the photos on the floor, and now they're everywhere. But I love the idea of photos. What else? I think I see the beginnings of a hand, maybe. Nope, someone's scratching. Yes. An object that can be used to tell a story. That's a great one. And I like that it's vague because it depends on what story you're trying to tell. Right? Saying that, oh, I brought this pen because this pen is cool could be a story. Or it could be something else. It could be something from an event or a memory or something you got from a fundraiser. Physical objects are great. They reinforce points. And they serve another advantage, which is they give you something to do with your hands. We're going to get to hands a little later in this presentation, but by having an object, you don't have as much time that you're wondering what to do with your hands because you're holding the object. It's like, oh, we have a pen, or oh, we have this photo, let me show it to you. It also helps you be a little more dynamic because you're thinking about your objects and your props. Let's see if we can think of one more. What's one more thing that might be useful to bring with you to an FTC or FRC judging session? I'll go. Team gear, right? A lot of teams have hats or headbands or sweatshirts or t-shirts or anything that is branding on the team. As a judge for FTC and FLL, that is really, really helpful. I'm sure it is for FRC as well. I've just never had that opportunity. Because having the team with the team uniform helps you remember them. It helps you remember the words they said, but it helps you tie it back to a physical event. So everybody showing up in their shirts makes them the prop. And it's like, oh, the team with the red sweatshirts told us this. Let me look through my notes and see which team it was. Oh, look, it was Stuyvesant, right? But it helps them know. I don't remember who told me this. I remember someone told me it. I remember what they were wearing. Now I can find them. It helps make it not be a vague memory. So that's really helpful. Starting with the next exercise, I'm going to ask you to be in groups of 2 or 3. So this is the time where if you're not sitting anywhere near somebody, you should move. Okay, I don't see anybody that looks like they're alone anymore. Excellent. Next thing that's different about presenting in person is you no longer have notes on the side of the computer. And I keep saying in person, but I really mean at first judging, because I clearly have notes on the side of my computer here and on my computer and everywhere else. But when you go into the chairman's interview or the FTC interview, you only have what you bring with you. And it becomes important to think about the type of notes that you have, right? I have seen teams, namely FLL teams, come in and read me a piece of paper that contains every word they're going to say. And while that's fine and legal, it's not particularly impactful. They're focused on the paper, they're reading the paper, and I don't really get to see the kid. You want to have something that's smaller. And an index card or a Post-it is a perfectly good size because it forces you to just list the points you're trying to make and not every word you're going to say. It's really helpful to have those points in case you forget. But I can look down really fast and say, so I was talking about this thing, and then I wanted to write Post-its. Yes, I wanted to tell people about Post-its. It's not a secret that you're using the notes as a prompt, but the fact that it's just one quick idea gets you right back to the audience again faster, and that's really helpful. With a presentation that you've prepared, you've probably memorized what's on the Post-it and don't need it anyway. I like to bring it with me anyway as a security blanket. I will put the Post-it or index card in my pocket. I know it's there. I can pull it out if I need to. I probably won't need to, but it takes the pressure off me that, oh no, what if I freeze and forget what my points were, right? I've provided myself with that little bit of insurance that now I know that if I need it, I can pull it out. And it doesn't look bad. It's just nicer if you can present without. So it could be in your hand, it could be in your pocket. So now we've got our next exercise. This is the one that you're all in groups for. See, I have notes. I'd like everybody to find something small on their person. It's fine if it's your phone. Oh, sorry, a piece of paper or a phone, because we're going to be writing words on them. Okay, and on the phone, I would like you to write 3 words, or paper if you don't have a phone. I'd like you to write 3 words, 1 per line. They can be any words you want. Does anyone need more time? Okay, so you all have 3 words. Now we're going to do the actual exercise. One of you in your group pick to go first, and someone else is going to hand them the phone or the paper, and they're going to tell you a story that uses those 3 words. It's okay to look down while you're doing it at what those 3 words are. The idea is to get yourself used to speaking about an idea. And then after you go, cycle until everyone in your group has gone. Any questions on what we're doing? I think I'm going to come down. 30 seconds. Okay, I'm starting again in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I saw all of you talking, which was great. You have to practice speaking in order to get better at speaking. And I also saw that you were all pretty animated when you were speaking, which was good. What I didn't see was anybody who was nervous about using the phone or the paper to speak. And that's good. That was what we were trying to do, get used to the idea. And you saw that it didn't impact anyone's story. Right? Whether they had to look down periodically or not, it was okay. What we didn't see was anybody who was just engrossed in their phone reading. And the reason that didn't happen was because there were only 3 words on the phone. It's not that interesting, so there's no temptation to keep looking at them as you go. A next big difference between presenting on Zoom and presenting in person is on Zoom, you have the choice of whether you use your hands or not. You can use them, but you might not be positioned to where your camera is, or you could choose to have them in your lap folded, or you could sit on them, or you can do whatever you want. When you present in the real world, you have hands. Whether you want them or not, you're there and you have to think about them. So what do we do with our hands? The first thing to think about, is something wrong? Oh, okay. The first thing to think about with your hands is what is the resting position of your hands? Ideally, it's something like this, where you just have an open gesture, they're not touching each other, they're not doing anything. That leaves your hands free to move naturally. When you have a conversation with someone, when you talk to your siblings or your friends or your parents, your hands do move around. We just don't think about it because we're not nervous. When we get up to give a presentation, all of a sudden it's like, I have hands, I don't know what to do with them, I must think about it. And we want to try to not think about them as much. By having them in that resting position, you're inviting them to do what they do naturally. And that's pretty important. The other thing that happens when we're nervous is we fidget. That always happens. It took me years of practice and training to stop fidgeting as I speak. And you don't have years, the chairman's interview is soon. Luckily, there are techniques you can use to deal with that. One of them is to hold something. When I see someone fidgeting a lot, I'll tell them to hold a pen or whatever they have handy in one hand. It's really hard to fidget when you're holding something. If I'm holding something, it's hard for my hands to touch each other. It's also hard for me to fidget because I'm holding something. And more importantly, I've given my hands something to do. It is totally fine to hold a pen while you're doing your chairman's interview. It's also fine to fidget. The problem with fidgeting is that it's distracting. If I'm sitting here and I'm doing this, you're all now watching my hands. And I've given you something to focus on that's not my words. I want you to be really, really focused on my words because I only have a little bit of time to convey the message, and I need you to get it. There's natural gestures, which is what I've been doing the entire day. And there's also gestures that are more intentional, that help you paint the picture of something. We went into our new robotics lab and we opened the door. I've set the scene that the lab is over there. I've shown that there's a door, and I've called attention to what I've been talking about. Those are the gestures that do not happen naturally. You have to think about those in advance to know what they're going to be. There's some common ones, and with training you get used to those. Whenever I'm making points, the first point is this, the second point is this, the third point is this. That's true of pretty much any talk I give, so I don't have to think about it. Whereas, oh, I was talking to the little FLL kids and they were so cute, establish the height of a kid. Those are things you have to think about because they're talk specific. But getting them in there creates more imagery and more recognition. It helps it create a stronger memory. And those things matter because a lot of teams are doing the same things. And everybody who says they mentor an FLL team, mentored an FLL team. If you sound enthusiastic about it, if you help it create a visual picture, it makes it more memorable that your team did it. It also shows that it's something you're passionate about and is part of your team's culture, which is also helpful. Unsurprisingly, we're going to do another exercise. Everybody is in the same groups as before, except for the person who just walked in. You get to find a group. And this exercise is going to be a little shorter, but it requires you to stand up. I know I'm terrible. I'm going to make you stand up and sit down a few times today. So sorry to the people who have laptops, but you have to stand up. Okay. This has 2 parts. The first one is you're going to tell everyone in your group how you got here today. And when you're undoing it, they're going to tell you what they thought your resting position was. So for this, don't hold a phone or anything else so people can see what it is. So go for it. When your groups are done, you can sit down. Since I wasn't participating, I got to observe that. I saw a lot of you were animated as you were talking about this, which is great. I wasn't expecting so much enthusiasm for how you got here today, but it came out in your body language. I saw one person who was trying to prove me wrong on the you all have hands thing by hiding her hands in her sweatshirt, but they still count even if you can't see them. And I also noticed something interesting, and I suspect it's from years of experience and training. Mr. Blay has a different resting position when he's listening and when he's speaking, and I think that that's good and it's really interesting. When you're listening, you were going like this. When you were speaking like anyone else would. No one else had one that was so different, so I thought that was interesting. It's not good or bad, it's data, but it was an interesting thing that without any effort, it just happened. Okay, in addition to having hands, you also have legs and a whole body. None of that exists on Zoom. And that makes speaking more difficult. Because now that we have our whole body, we have to figure out what to do with it. And when people are nervous, they tend to do things with their body that are less than ideal. A really common one is that I'm really nervous when I'm speaking, so my nervous energy has to go somewhere, and it goes into distracting the audience. Right? We want to try to not rock. Having that nervous energy is something that you have to practice and get rid of, but we want to try to make it not part of our speech. We talked about fidgeting, and I know we talked about fidgeting with the hands too, but I can totally fidget with my legs and my body. I can do a whole thing, right? And moving with purpose. I'm not saying that when you speak you have to plant yourself here and never move. It's that you want to move in a way that you're thinking about it not being a distraction to people. And often that comes from moving when you change points, right? In our competition season, we're going to compete in New York. New York was good, blah, 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 blah. And the last time we competed was in South Carolina. I moved when I was changing points. So I let myself release that nervous energy. I didn't just try to stay here. If I stayed here, I would be everywhere and it wouldn't be helpful. But I moved so it was okay. And it doesn't have to be with a point. It can be you move every 15 seconds. But the idea is that you move and you stop, not that you're in a continuous state of movement. The continuous state of movement is what distracts people. The moving with purpose lets people know that, oh, I should pay attention to this, they moved, right? So it lets people consume your material in a way that's easier for them, and that's a good thing. And imagine that we have another exercise. This talk is largely exercises. And unfortunately for you, it's a standing one again because it's about your legs. So we all get to stand up again. Yay! Okay. This time, you're going to tell your teammates about 2 or 3 TV shows or movies or streaming things or books or whatever it is that you like. And the difference is between each one, you're going to move. You're not going to move far because you're all standing in bleachers, but you can turn around, you can anchor yourself, you can shift your weight. You're just trying to make a point visually of when you're between your 2 things. And this time I'm going to say in advance, when you're done, sit down so I know. $30. And starting again in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good news is I'm not going to make you get up again. Ian, would you mind moving to one of the 2 groups in the back? Because they only have 2 people and you have 4, and that's why your group took longer. Okay, cool. We have 2 more exercises coming up and a little more learning stuff. Next one is eye contact. Eye contact essentially doesn't exist when you present on Zoom because you're just staring at your computer, ideally your camera. In the real world, it does. It's awkward when you talk to someone and they're staring at the floor. It's awkward when they're all over the place. That doesn't mean you have to stare the people down you're talking to. It means being deliberate with your eye contact. In fact, it's unnerving when someone just stares at you and they're talking as well and never moves. Luckily, there's multiple judges, and that lets us avoid staring at one person too long by switching our focus between them. It's similar to the thing with the moving our legs. You want it to be deliberate, right? Not like it's going to the fair, that you're going to get dizzy, right? But talking to one person, making a point, or talking to them for a certain amount of time, and looking at another person, everyone feels included and everyone goes on. You may have heard when you were learning to speak, especially on school projects, that when you're talking, if you're nervous, you just ignore everyone there and you talk to the back of the room and it's okay because you'll be less nervous. You won't be that much less nervous. In fact, you might be more nervous because you won't know how the people are reacting to things. First judges are very good at looking responsive to things. They nod when you talk. They look encouraging. It's less scary to look at them than it is to look at the back of the room. It's also easier to relate to people because they're real people, right? When you talk to your friends, you don't say, oh, I was wondering how this went, so I wanted to stare at the wall when I talked to you. That would be absurd. Also, if you're looking at somebody, you can see, do they look like they understand what's going on? Do they look confused? Are they taking notes? That's all okay. And first, judges will take notes. They'll look down while you're talking, and that's okay because they're writing stuff down. You get a lot of information when you're judging in a very short time, and it's hard to retain everything, so you are writing things down. And some people look at you when they're writing things down, and some look at their paper. But if they look like they're writing the great American novel, they are fully engaged in listening to you. That's what they're writing down, and that's totally okay. Our next exercise is in the same groups you were in before, except for Ian, who moved. You're going to tell the same stories or similar stories, except this time you're going to switch your focus between the things. So I'm talking about a TV show to person one and a second TV show to person two. If your group only has two people, just look away between as if you switch to somebody else. Thirty seconds. Five, four, three, two, one. Everything I've said so far was true before COVID. Yes?
So, like, if you're keeping on, if you're staying on like a single subject, how do you choose when to pick
You pick some amount of time that isn't like 3 seconds, so 10 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever, and then just between sentences you switch then. What you're trying to avoid here is switching in the middle of a thought because that distracts people. But a sentence is the end of a thought even if it's on the same topic as another sentence. Good question. Everything I've said so far was true before COVID. We are going to have the added challenge of presenting in masks and being judged wearing masks. That means your eyes become a lot more important because that's the only thing that you can see. Luckily, people always say the smile is in the eyes, and that is true. That means we have to show our enthusiasm with our eyes and our voice and our bodies. We can't show it so much with our facial expressions because nobody can see them. They're hiding behind masks. Sometimes that requires being a little bit more animated than it does in the past, but you can still manage to go. This is going to be our last exercise, and then I have some more information, and it's a short one. Everybody is going to say 2 phrases to their group. One of them is is Saturday, and just say that normally. I'm not expecting you to be excited that it's Saturday, although maybe you are, there's no school. And the other one is I'm proud that, and anything that you're genuinely proud of. I'm proud I got 100 on a test. I'm proud we built a robot last year. I'm proud that my church service went on time. Whatever you want, something that you're excited about. So today is Saturday, and I'm proud that. $30 seconds. Okay, everybody seems done, so I won't do a countdown. I heard the enthusiasm all the way from here, and that was really good. I hope you saw it in each other's eyes as well because you were closer. But that's important. When we're saying that we did something, we want to sound proud of it because first is about inspiring people. So if you say, I mentored an FLL kid, it's probably factually true. I mentored an FLL kid, his name was Charlie, and he learned all sorts of stuff, right? That's going to resonate with people, and that's going to show that you're embracing the values at first. Before we go on to specific types of interviews, a big disclaimer, we don't currently know what interviews are going to be held in person and probably won't know until closer to the time. So I'm talking about chairman's and pit interviews as if they'll be in person so that you'll be prepared, but I don't know whether that is actually true or not. Okay, so chairman's. In chairman's, you have 3 students go in and you talk to a bunch of chairman's judges. And people are pretty well practiced at the presentation part. For Q&A, I recommend deciding who's answering questions by topic. This was important online too, but it's even more important in person because a bunch of people all in the front staring at each other wondering who wants to answer something suggests that you don't know the answer. And I also recommend picking a captain to delegate as needed. This is something I recommended to 694 last year as well. The captain is usually the most experienced person on the chairman's interview committee, and they know who should answer, and they can make it clear who should answer. So if there's a question that straddles 2 topics and everyone's like, I don't know, you answering or you answering, the person can say, hey, Sarah, why don't you take that one? It also buys time if you get a tough question that, Sarah's sitting there wondering, like, what do I say? Right? Having someone introduce her gives her another 5 seconds to figure out a cogent answer, and it lets you prompt the person. This is something I do with entry-level people on my team. Someone will ask a question like, do you do monitoring? And they're sitting there in an audit and clearly not knowing the answer. And I'll say, hey, Lindsay, can you talk about the health checks? Oh, yeah, we do X, Y, Z, and blah, blah, blah. And the fact that they can answer from the minimal prompt shows that this really happens, and it gives the person a clue what they're supposed to say. So it helps avoid the team being nervous. Granted, it doesn't help the captain any, but by picking someone who has done this before, they're probably less nervous about it to begin with. The other aspect of in-person is pit interviews. Pit interviews are tough because they're unexpected, so you don't necessarily have the right people on hand. First thing is you should know what the awards are. I recommend 1, going to Ian's presentation right after this, and 2, reading the award description shortly before the event so they're top of the mind. That lets you know what you're expecting to get questions about, right? It's not the vast state of the universe, it's about the things they're judging you on. Consider the number of people you're allowed to bring and who can answer questions about what. If you don't bring someone who's the expert on a topic, that's okay, but make sure someone who's there can speak to it, at least somewhat. And it's fine if they're speaking about it in the third person. Arnav built this system. The system's really good. I know a lot about how it works, but he knows all the details. That's okay. They know you weren't allowed to bring everybody, but if everyone says, we don't know where that came from, it's magic, that's sort of the end of the road on that. Also, it's okay to have a reference sheet, especially because you can't bring everyone, right? Have a list of names and facts, and it's like, the person who knows about this isn't here, but they left us with a few key points that we were able to talk about ourselves. And think about how to represent people who can't come at all, but also people who are there but aren't in the pit at that exact moment in time or are busy. Because if the number of people is restricted, you probably don't have a lot of extra people just sitting around waiting to answer questions, and odds are high that even if someone knows the answer to the question, they're not there at that particular moment in time. Finally, enjoy the rest of the sessions, and we're giving away another book, so we're going to practice counting off again.
1,
2, 3, 4, 5,
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
13,
14.
Okay, 4, you were way louder this time. Good job. Okay, random number between 1 and 14. Our random number is 3. Okay, can both winners of the book come up to the bottom of the stage and I will give you your book. Thank you all for coming. The next session is in 13 minutes.